Judy, thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited to talk to you just about branding and being bold and standing out and just making your brand unstoppable. I love
Hmm.
it. So thank you so much for taking the time and coming onto the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. This is going to be so good. So, first off, before we start getting into exactly what personal brands or small businesses can do to make their brand stand out, I want to find out a little bit about you. How did you get into branding?
Mm. Um, I would like to say it was highly intentional, but it wasn't. It's sort of like the universe shows your path. And sometimes we are, oh, I don't want to even say smart enough. Sometimes we sort of fall into it and sometimes we resist it, but it usually comes back around in some manner.
Yeah.
So I was the kid that did not, well, I still am the kid that didn't fit in. But when you're young, it was so torturous. I was dark and depressed and suicidal. It was bad.
Oh,
And
no.
all I wanted to really do was like be like everyone else. And that's really never worked out for me. Now I'm thrilled and delighted that that is the case. But as a kid, it was absolute torture. You know, there's something about our culture and the programming that we value this whole fitting in thing, which
Mhm.
is so goofy because we spend so much of our lives trying to fit in, and then we're kind of kicked out of the nest and told, go do you, when we don't even really have access to, like, what is that, who is that, where do I find that?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got started. I was a visual designer who I wanted to specialize in logos and brand identity. And my teachers told me that wasn't a thing. So this was way back, way in the dark ages. So I went home and found this company, which still exists in London, which is a huge, very multinational design firm, and that's what they specialize in. And I went back to school and I went, well, these guys are doing it, so I'm doing it too. And that's really how I got into branding. Back in the day when people only thought branding was for like Coca-Cola and the Marlboro Man at the time,
Yeah.
which is kind of
That's,
funny. Now we
but
didn't really
that's
have
true.
languaging. Yeah. So people would say, I'm a small business. What do I need that for? I'm a human. What do I need that for?
Mhm.
But we are all a walking, talking brand all the time. We just don't realize.
You know what? You're right. We don't realize it, but explain what that means that we are all a walking, talking brand and we don't realize it.
Yeah,
How
so
are
if
we a
you think
brand?
about it, I mostly work with founders and leaders and C-level type people. And it's so interesting to me that, well, you and I just touched on it briefly, that we so often don't even have access to what makes us special, what makes us different, what makes us us. Like I was just speaking to someone and I said, I just recently found out, like in the last year, that your fingerprint is formed in the womb, and it's one of the first things on a human that is created. I did not
Oh,
know that. So I always talk about, like, you have this very unique fingerprint, but you really do, like, no
yeah,
kidding. And
literally.
that's, yeah. So the way that you see the world, the way that you perceive, the way that you problem solve, the way that you imagine and identify and create and lean into your unique gifts, those are all very important brand elements that most people either ignore, we don't value, we don't leverage, we don't monetize, we don't even we don't embrace on the level that would allow us all to be lifted, because really that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think so, is to lift one another and become stronger and better together. So
Yeah.
you can't do that if you can't access your own fabulosity.
And you make it sound super easy, right? And it's harder, I think, to do that sometimes. I remember when you were talking about when you were a kid and, you just wanted to be like everybody else. You wanted, to fit in. And it's interesting. My name is Deanna. And when I was growing up, you did not hear that name anywhere. So when we would go like on field trips, I couldn't find the pens or the keychains or anything with my name on it. And I hated my name
Mhm.
because it was so different. People misspelled it. I couldn't find it. It was just so frustrating. And I remember feeling like, why can't I just have a normal name like everybody else? And and it's really not that different. But as a kid, it felt
Right.
so different, and I just wanted to fit in. And I don't think it was until I was older that I liked that my name was not like everybody else. That
Yeah.
a lot of people only knew one Deanna. You know?
Yeah. And so funny. It's so funny because so there's this level of like, that's just cultural that we're programmed to fit in, right? We're
Yeah,
supposed to have a buddy and you're supposed to hold my hand when you cross the street and all this stuff. And then as we get older, like for me, the real awareness was when I started working and I was sitting in a meeting with all these muckety mucks and I was teaching them basically what I was sharing was the value of not fitting in because that's what great brands do, right? They have the
right.
audacity to stand out, but so few are really willing to even investigate that, much less own it. And so a lot of my work is around accessing that and owning it. And part of the reason that it is hard is because we can't see that for ourselves. We need that reflection. We need somebody to say, hey, did you know that I can't do that? Like what you do is so unique and special. And then the way you take this and combine it with that and make this peanut butter cup, wow, that's amazing. Why aren't we sharing that with the world and using that as your platform, your process, your widget? Like, why aren't you using that to kind of stand out, be different, and then allow yourself to be separate from the pack? Because being in the pack it's not where the joy is. It's not where
Yeah,
the fun is. It's not where the juice is for living a fulfilled, full life. And that's what a brand isn't like a logo. That's just one element. It's like you're a
yeah,
diamond. You don't a diamond doesn't have one facet. The more
yes,
facets, the better. Well, you don't just polish one facet. You're going to polish the whole bloody thing.
absolutely. Yes, that's so true. It's so true. But if somebody's listening right now and they're like, okay, it does make sense, but how how do I create that
Yeah.
brand? How do I create a brand that stands out? What do I look at? What do I look for?
So the first thing is to really start with assessing your assets. So it's so cool because these days we have so many cool tools to do that.
Yeah.
And I love that. So I'm a big fan of assessments, but I like funky assessments. So Gallup strengths is one. Like my first Gallup strength is strategic. So I'm someone that when I call it pushing off, like when you push off from shore and you're on a boat, what are you pushing off with? So I go to strategy because that's how I process life. But then you can also access all these other things. That's why people are so into human design and enneagrams and astrology and all the things, because those give us tools to understand our inner self better. It doesn't start out there. It's not an external process. It's an internal assessment.
Mhm.
And once you have those, you can assess, just like in a business, you would figure out your numbers and your costs and your revenue and your talent, you're above the line and below, all the things. That we're going to do the same thing with your abilities and your fabulosity and your inherent qualities. So we know how to create that peanut butter cup that makes you tasty, delicious, and unresistible. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So once you figure it out, then what do you do with that?
Well, it kind of depends. So it depends on, are we talking about scaling your business? Are we talking
Let's
about,
Yeah, let's talk about let's assume that it
okay,
is most of my audience are women entrepreneurs
okay,
and they're just starting out their business. So they're
hmm,
in that early stage and probably figuring out who they are right now.
yeah,
They might finding out who they are and really getting clear, working on getting clear on who their ICA is, what they want their brand voice to be right through that early stage.
right,
So they've heard, take this um, strengths test, any of the strategic tests, right? I like
Right.
strengths. I know offline we were talking a little bit.
Yeah.
You're a big strengths fan too. And you identify what makes you unique and different, but then how do you incorporate that
Perfect.
into your business or yourself?
Yeah. So there's again, the first part is like data collection,
Yeah.
right? So first of all, we want to know what your strengths are. We want to know, when I first started this, we didn't have some of the verbiage that we have today. So I wouldn't say like, what are your values? Because people would be like, what? I would ask people, what's important to you?
Yeah.
And when we know about your business, what do you want us to think when we think about Deanna Hinsz, right? Like we want to think about what's the perception? What are people thinking? How are we using this? And one fun way to do it, well, there's a couple that are super easy and reveal a lot. So one is to make a little short list of like 3 to 5 companies that you admire, 3 to 5 businesses, 3 to 5 humans. Like, is it Steve Jobs? Is it Disney? Is it who is it? And then list some of the attributes that you think are amazing about them, and that's why you admire them. And once you start that list, you can then see, oh, are these attributes that I also own? Or are they attributes I would like to own? Like, what in here is a piece of me? Because sometimes when we look at ourselves, we come up with nothing. Like, what
That's
makes
so
you special?
true.
Well, you
Right?
know,
We see the negative. We don't see the good stuff
right.
sometimes.
I'm not special. What are you talking about? But when we start to look at, okay, I really like this brand. It's reliable. It's beautiful. It's consistent. I understand the message. I relate to its leadership. I love the product. Whatever it is, right? I like their campaigns. I think their spokespeople are amazing. Why? Just keep asking why. Be curious.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's one way to get really start to dig into these assets that will then translate into your content, your marketing, your copy, your outreach. You'll start to see how these dots connect.
Yeah.
And then another fun exercise is I call it the power of two. So you'll ask in writing, because we don't want to rely on what we hear, because we often interpret what we hear. So it's like when we see color, I'm wearing gray, but what you might see as this gray could be completely different than what I am perceiving. That's why we have the Pantone matching system. That's why we have paint chips. So we can agree that we're seeing the same thing. So we want to do this in writing. And you're going to ask 2 friends, 2 colleagues, 2 clients, 2 vendors, and 2 family members. What do they see as your top attributes? What do they think is fabulous about you? Because
Oh,
everyone that interacts with you in a different manner will have a different response. Or some of them will be similar, and you will see the commonalities. And you'll start to see how the world views you, which may not line up with how you view you,
yeah.
which is
That's
also
so interesting. Both of those, I'm like, oh, I might try actually both of those things you just shared because I've never done either one of those. And I see the value and the information that you get from both of them.
Mhm.
I mean, oh my gosh, it's like, why didn't I ever think of doing this
There's a
before?
lot. Yeah, and so that's what's
Yeah.
really cool about branding. So yes, it can be really challenging to see it for yourself. And
Yeah.
that's why it's awesome to have people like me to help lead you through it and then see how to apply it and then step into this bolder version of you. But the same thing is true with whatever it is that you offer. But the thing about it is that it can also be very easy and very fun and very systematic, really. There's a lot of ways to kind of get to the information that are
Mhm.
really enjoyable and not like super painful that people think it's very like, oh, this is going to hurt. No,
Do you
it's going to
find
be fun.
do you find that sometimes people are afraid to step into that because there's a fear of being judged or that they're looking at maybe another business or another personal brand that they like and respect and they're doing it this way so they feel like they need to do it that way as well and not take your advice and step out into their own personal brand? Do you see
Yeah.
that?
So one of my little, I call them isms, like
Okay.
mine are Judy isms, get it?
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
is that fitting in is not a recipe for success.
Ooh,
So one of the things that happens when I find this is what I find happens a lot often is when we start a business, we're just like, yippee, this is so amazing. I'm going to rock the world. I feel it. I feel it. Right. And you just lean into it, and your passion and your enthusiasm kind of fueled the ride. And then at a point, things sort of flatten out, or they kind of get a little bit wonky. And that's when we lift our head and we start looking around like, oh crap, like, what am I doing wrong? Right?
Yeah.
That's our first internal question.
Right.
What am I doing wrong? So we start looking at other people and other businesses and think, oh, well, they must know better. And that I get super crazy over that, because what works for one person, and then the gurus who are like, do it this way because I did it this way and I'm a gazillionaire. And it's like, no, dude, that's your formula for success. That's
Mhm.
not my formula for success. Part of the journey is figuring out your formula, your recipe for success. You don't go on the show Chopped where they give you a basket of goodies and we don't all make the same bloody dish.
That's true.
We have our pantry of fabulosity and our own personal ingredient list, and we are cooking up something amazing every day. But we have to be curious. When you use your curiosity and your creativity and your business smarts, that's where we start to uncover your own formula. But you have to lean into it and be curious and kind of stop looking at other people for their success story and be committed to writing your own.
You know what, when you said that we all get to like have the same ingredients, but we create something different. And I'm like, yeah, we absolutely do. And that's okay. Like, that's good that you want to be. So when you do this, when you start taking all this information, utilizing these tips that you gave us, we start to stand out as a leader, correct?
Well, leadership is an interesting journey. And I think the first piece of it is, are you willing to own that you have the capacity and or are already a leader? So to me, a
Mm.
leader is not somebody who is at the top of the mountain looking down on their subjects. A leader is pretty much, I think we're all leaders, and that we've been lied to that there is this like holy mound where the leaders live. But if you are leading your dog across the street, your family to dinner, your little sister to be a better person, your marriage to flourish, as well as your business, those are all examples and illustrations of leadership. It's not just confined to the business space and people who make lots of money and drive a Ferrari. That's such bullshit.
I
So
love that. You're
the
so
first is,
right.
right? Like, we have to
Yes.
say, well, okay, what's my version of success? How do I define a fulfilled life? What do I call leadership? And then lean into learning about it. Lean into the not, now we are know so much about energy and working with the field, like stuff that was considered woo woo wacko just a minute ago. And now it's like, it's common knowledge. We know that it's a thing. Like, there's so many cool things in the world right now that feed into this awareness that we are all leaders and that it's time for us to take up that baton and run with it instead of cowering and pretending that life is happening to us rather than we are actually impacting the field. We're impacting our communities. We're impacting our neighborhoods, and really, like, be an active participant instead of this, instead of being, I don't want to call it victims, but sort of at the mercy of it rather than, and it doesn't start like a huge thing.
Yeah.
It might just start with what you're eating, or who are the 5 people you surround yourself with. Or, Marty Seligman talks about, in his book Flourish, he's got this formula called PERMA. And the first one is like, how are you, P is for positive engagement. How are you bringing positivity to the world? Because any of us can bitch and moan and complain and
Right.
trauma share, but it's this invitation to do something else, to do something different, and to start looking for opportunities where your gifts and leadership will be valued and amplified.
So how can you use your brand to show this leadership and combine the two?
Well, not only can you, you already are. So it's really, owning that awareness. So I have a little formula, I call it ask. And the first one is we've already talked about it. It's like, what are your assets? How can you you want to gather all your assets, all the data, like
Yeah.
get really clear what you're working with, right? Like
Yeah.
what's the clay that you're going to be forming this wonderful sculpture. But then the next thing is now you have this awareness. And how do you want to use that awareness? Well, you want to design a strategy. We're always in the process. It's one of the reasons that I love this connection point between branding, and I don't do visual branding anymore. I'm much more in the strategic consulting arena and business advisory. So how do you take this, connect all the dots so that now we are forming some sort of a strategy? Well, first you got to know where you're going.
Right.
So what's your end game? Do you want to go from Florida to California? Well, you're going to probably want a map,
Right.
right? I call a map a motivated action plan. So how do you plan to get there? That's your strategy. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you just know how to get from South Florida to North Florida. Maybe that's as far as you got. Okay, awesome. So let's get there and then we can assess and start again. And it's an ongoing process. We evolve. I never thought I would be this person I am today. I didn't consciously say like, oh, when I grow up, no. I mean, if you told me I'd be like teaching and training and living in Florida, and I would just think you were high. Like that was whack. Like life evolves and we evolve with it. And part of it is just really leaning into those breadcrumbs and seeing what's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you start where you
I
are.
like how you shared about the map. And when it comes to branding, that, yes, there's that visual aspect of it, but there's also that strategic behind it of figuring out where do you want to go.
Yeah.
So let's
Like
just
not
say,
everyone wants to serve, health professionals. Not everyone
yeah,
wants to serve attorneys. Not everyone wants to serve engineers. That's great. That's
yeah,
why we have all these flavors, right? You get
right.
to figure out what's your flavor and then where will you be valued and honored and can apply your secret sauce so that other people are lifted as you are.
Yes.
We're here to lift humanity.
I agree. I agree 100%. Judy, what's the biggest mistake that you see people make when it comes to doing this?
Probably that we discount it as not important when actually it reveals so much
Yeah.
and can help us live a life that we really deeply enjoy. And dismissing some of these aspects as unimportant when in fact they all translate powerfully.
Yes.
And they all translate into not only having a fulfilled life, but also being able to afford it because now you're being rewarded for your gifts rather than marginalized in any manner. So, yeah, to me,
And
that's sort of to not go like a lot of people would think, oh, I can do it myself or it's not important. And neither of those are actually true.
so if they're thinking that, if they're listening and they're saying that to themselves right now, what is your answer? What would you
Get
tell them?
get curious. Like,
Yeah.
really, even think about that. Why would you even consider that that's unimportant? Like, where did you come up with that? And then what's the evidence of that? And then the next part of it is really, for me, the big shift and a lot of what I share with my clients is really around personal development. I believe that you cannot grow your business without growing yourself. So the next place to look is, are you resisting growth? Are you do you feel like you're uninterested in growing as a leader? And if so, why? Why? Like if you had a child, would you not feed it? If you had a little sister or a best friend that wasn't developing, wouldn't you want to assist in that process? Like this is a process, life. Who you are at 20 is not who you are at 40, is not who you are at
Amen.
60. Like,
That is,
yeah, like
yeah. Thank
we,
God.
right? Yeah, like enjoy the journey for Christ's sake and figure it out. Yeah, so get some help, find community, join a mastermind, join a small book club, figure out where you can go. So for me, like I was suicidal and dark, and when I got involved in personal development, it changed my life. it didn't just change my life that day. It's been 30, 40 years of a completely different trajectory, curiosity, education I will never, ever let go of. And it's what gives my life color and flavor and joy.
I love that.
Mine's yours. Yeah.
I love that. So Judy, how can we find you? If we want to work with Judy and really get clear on leadership and get clear on our branding, how
Yeah.
do we find you?
I would love to have a chat. So I'm at Unforgettable Brands, 2 T's, 1 S, unforgettableBrands.com. And I'm all over social at Judy Wins, and I'm on Insta at JWins CEO Pro. So
I love
become
it.
the CEO of your life, people.
Oh my gosh, that's great. That is great. And all of the links are right below. So you can click on those links and connect with Judy. And I encourage you to do so because there's so much information you can learn from her and work with her. So Judy, thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. All right, everybody, we'll catch you next week.